Today we're going to be talking about this, the Subaru Solterra. Now this is a mid-price, mid-performing, mid-sized SUV that promises all of Subaru's best bits but in a pure electric package. The thing is, this car actually shares quite a lot of its architecture with the Toyota BZ4X. So is it really a Subaru or just a Toyota in a funny hat? But before I answer that question, whether it's basically better to buy a car by Subaru rather than something that sounds like a part number, don't forget there are loads of really good things over on electrifying.com. And all things being equal, would you rather have a Subaru or a Toyota? Let me know in the comments.
Of course, the reason we keep mentioning Toyota and getting a faint sense of déjà vu is that the Solterra and the BZ4X are a co-production between the two companies. So they're the same basic car with slightly different toppings. The equivalent Toyota is a couple of grand more expensive, but you can get a cheaper BZ4X with just front-wheel drive, where Subaru only comes with all-wheel drive and starts at $5 under 50 grand for the limited model. So for the Solterra, you're looking at a 64 kilowatt-hour usable battery pack, motors at each end to give that four-wheel drive, and 288 miles of possible range on the smaller 18-inch wheels. But more on that in a minute.
As far as looks go, you will not be surprised to find that it does look a lot like its Toyota sibling. It's got the same black plastic arches which seem to bait the internet in a perfect fashion, although it does have different headlights without Toyota's weird little eyebrow on the top. You also get this hexagonal grille in the front which looks a little bit different, and round fog lights. Then down the sides it's kind of business as usual, and then you get to the back. Now apparently the tailgates are different, they are different mouldings. But I don't quite understand this because I can't really tell the difference. And if you're going to go to all the trouble of making a different tailgate, why don't you make it more different? In fact, the only thing that's really obvious is the fact that the Toyota BZ4X has a full width light bar where the Solterra has two independent tail lights, but it's not really enough to make a big difference. Obviously, the badges are different. So my question is, do these things make a big difference to you? Do they sway you, or do they just pass you by? Unsurprisingly, on the inside, the Solterra is again very much like a BZ4X. Now, personally, I don't mind it. Everyone else seems to hate it, but I think there's a weight of popular opinion thing going on and everyone has started nitpicking. In the Solterra, there are two trims. You can have limited or touring, and touring is the higher spec. Like this one, you get leather, wireless charging and a big sunroof for an uplift of about £3,000. There's the usual bridge thing here, which has the driver's display in front of it, which I don't mind. Actually, it acts a little bit like a heads-up display because you don't have to refocus your eyes between the road and the information you're trying to get. I think the graphics are okay, although they look a little bit blocky. Also, the way I sit in this car, which is back and slightly lower, it means that the steering wheel, which has to be necessarily low, starts to block the driver's display, which I don't like. This happens a little bit in some Peugeots, and I find it quite odd. It's not my favourite thing. I do like the big central touchscreen here in the middle. I think the graphics on that are actually really good. And there's the usual buttons for climate control, heated seats, heated wheel, and defrosting here. The one thing that I have noticed though is that this car has a lot of driver assistance systems, very much like the Toyota. It also has a bong or a warning chime for everything. I do mean everything. From the boot closing to a door being open to leaving a key in it. But you know the one thing that drives me absolutely insane? If you've got the car, bong, in reverse, it does that all the time. And that actually makes it quite stressful to reverse the car. You think that you're going to be hitting something because it sounds like something's going wrong. This is a weird thing. Is there a thing in a car that would completely put you off it? Because that would stop me buying a Solterra. Let me know in the comments. But anyway, there's a decent centre console. Obviously the wireless charging pad is here underneath this clear plastic top. A couple of cup holders, decent storage here, and a big shelf under here. There is no glove box, although I don't actually mind that because I prefer the extra knee room. Though you do notice that it means there is nowhere to put the manual, which is quite thick. Personally, I'd just put it in the boot. Job done. As far as quality goes, well, it's not that plush, but but it feels like it might last. It is a Toyota, I mean a Subaru, after all.
As for space, well, it's a bit smaller than something like a Mustang Mach-E, but a 6-footer can be comfy in the back.
Plus there's a decent boot with a fairly wide opening and a sort of low load lip, plus a split floor which is handy for hiding cables, but no frunk. Okay, so Subarus have always been about their general ruggedness and four-wheel drive, which is why the Solterra only comes with 2 motors, one at each end, to give all-wheel drive. Now, they're 107 brake horsepower each, so even though that sounds like a lot, it's not that much in terms of a very heavy car, but 0 to 62 miles an hour in under 7 seconds is plenty. One thing it does do really well though is it gives solid traction. Even at a greasy junction, there's no tyre scramble. Now, one of the really interesting things that I found out about those 2 motors is, despite the fact that they're both exactly the same output, cattle grid handled it quite well. Yeah, despite the fact that they're both exactly the same output, they're not physically the same motor. The front one is short and fat to give you the best wheel travel, so you have the best turning circle possible, and the one in the back is thinner and flatter to give you the best boot space. It's quite neat, really. As for the rest of it, I think that this Subaru actually does ride a bit better than the Toyota. I'm on a really bumpy British B road here, as you can probably hear, and even though you can hear and feel the bumps, it's a lot better than the previous Toyota. I drove down exactly the same bit of road, so that's surprising. It seems to steer with a little bit more fluency, which is interesting, although like a lot of these cars, it feels like it carries its weight very low. If you can be bothered, it's actually quite perky. It does drive really quite nicely. There's not so much side-to-side rocking motion as you get with the Toyota. This could just be my imagination or tweaks to the way that the car has been set up, but I think it definitely makes a difference. One of the big plus points about the Solterra though is it does have brake regeneration via these paddles on the back of the steering wheel. So you pull the left-hand one to increase it, and then you can take it off again with the right-hand one. Although, I will say that I would prefer it to be a lot more aggressive. The other thing that I noticed was that when you've got the brake regeneration set quite hard and you lift off, it actually takes a fraction of a second for it to engage. So it can feel a little bit herky-jerky. What it needs to do is blend the brake regeneration from the lift of the throttle, not from off, pause, then regen. It's just a little bit less smooth and less refined than it could be. But Subarus have always been about their capability. Now, I don't think people are going to be heading out into the wastelands in their electric Solterra, but it needs to be capable of coping with a wet field or two. Oh, handy. And you know what? This is surprisingly capable. No, this isn't hardcore off-road, but it's more than most owners would probably do. And because you've got electric input, which is infinitely metered, and some excellent Subaru traction control, you can get around. There's also a thing called X mode, which is a button that you access down here, which gives you either snow and dirt modes or deep snow and mud modes. And basically, it's a little traction control system that just helps you get around. And even on the standard all-season tyres, a Solterra is far from being embarrassed. It can even wade quite deep water, which everybody thinks is amazing for an electric car. The thing about these things is they've got relatively short overhangs and a flat bottom, so when you're barging around in light off-road, it's actually not a problem. Anything short of a proper off-road course, and this thing is well within its limits. It's also quite Subaru-ish.
In terms of range and charging, the Solterra aims for the middle of the market, so it's neither particularly impressive or woeful. On the smaller 18-inch wheels of limited spec, you're supposed to see roughly 288 miles of WLTP range, but that drops to 257 for the better equipped touring on 20s. In the real world, that's likely to be sub 200. Enough for pottering about, undoubtedly, but one assumes that a practical car like a mid-size SUV might be expected to manage a bit more. It's not supposed to be a city car. All Solterras do have a heat pump though as standard, so that's good. AC charging is weak at 7 kilowatts, but with a quoted 150 kilowatt max of DC charging, 10 to 80% is possible in just half an hour, running from 20 to 156 miles of range. Though it has to be said you're much better off charging the Solterra from a low state of charge, simply because the charge curve drops off pretty sharply. See this charge curve graph from Fastned? Ideally, it should look like a tabletop, but it doesn't. Plus, there have been lots of complaints from longer tests that both the Toyota BZ4X and the Solterra are very inefficient and not reaching anywhere near their predicted or more expected ranges. I've been getting around 2 miles per kilowatt hour, which in this cold weather means 128 miles of range. That's just not good enough. Both the Solterra and the BZ4X are said to be getting an update to their paranoid battery software buffers, which will enable more range. But will that be enough? We shall see.
An interesting one here is that Toyota actually offers one of the best ownership prospects in the business as long as you have the car serviced at a Toyota main dealer. It guarantees the battery to 70% state of charge over 1 million kilometres, which is about 620,000 miles, which is pretty mega when you think about it. Now, Subaru only offers a guarantee for 100,000 miles for the battery and then 3 years and 60,000 miles on the rest of the car, which doesn't sound as good. But think about it. If Toyota is that confident in the battery, which is the same battery, don't forget, then it's probably going to be fine. I'm just going to come out and say it. I prefer the Subaru to the Toyota. Oh, another beep. I always knew that the platform was better as a four-wheel drive, but I do think that the Solterra actually drives a little bit better than the BZ4X. And I just feel a bit more kinship with the brand. I know that's not scientific, that's just the way I feel. The thing is, the Subaru can also be had slightly cheaper than the BZ4X, although it doesn't have quite the ownership prospect. I think the problem for both cars, though, is the fact that they're fine. They are not efficient enough, and there's loads of good cars coming out in the EV space at the moment. And when you enter the market with a brand new car that's only okay, as the BZ4X and the Solterra really are, I'm afraid that's not good enough.
So what do you reckon? Is the Solterra old hat before it's even started, or is it a solid all-wheel drive electric Subaru and something that appeals to you? Let us know in the comments. And if you want to know more about the Solterra or any of the competition, then why not pay us a virtual visit over at electrifying.com, where we can help you figure out whether an electric car is right for you.